Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the Gridiron Nation Online with Coach Bill Conley. I'm Jerod Smalley, here to get you set for the week that was and the week that will be in Ohio State football. And last week, I think, actually, Bill, Ohio State just scored again against Miami.
They're not done yet.
They're not done. They have decided they're just going to keep. That was wild last week, and it got out of hand, obviously. Second quarter was a quarter unlike any we've seen in Ohio State history. 42 points the Buckeyes scored in that quarter. And most importantly, Bill, I think the biggest takeaway, I don't know, we haven't talked about this yet, but I don't think there was a better outcome for Ohio State other than the score than how many people played and how much experience was gained there.
I think I saw Brutus get 3 or 4 snaps.
Probably did. They probably played really well.
And he probably had champion performance.
Probably a champion.
Now I'll say this. They didn't start off very fast. You know, and this is the first game we didn't start out fast. But, man, we finished super strong. What a great performance overall. A lot of guys played, like you said, the morale's high, the energy's high, and I like how the starters are on the sideline cheering on the other guys when they're in there because they don't want to give up any points either. And how about an offense? When's the last time? 3 different quarterbacks threw touchdown passes.
I don't know.
I don't know if that's ever happened.
I don't know. I mean, there were little quirky things about that game that were just like, not sure I've ever seen this before. Not sure I've ever seen this before. Happened a lot in that game,
yes.
I would argue. So that was fun to watch. Obviously, if you're an Ohio State fan, you enjoy seeing that, but you also enjoy seeing them play good competition. And you will get that this week with the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Maybe not the best team they're going to play all season. I don't think there's anyone that's going to argue that. But Ryan Day said it, matter of fact, on Tuesday, without a doubt, this is the best team they'll have faced so far when you consider offensive talent for Nebraska. They have some elite guys that will play in the NFL. Defensively, they're better than they were. I don't know that they're great, Bill, but they are definitely a little bit better than what they were a year ago when they really had trouble slowing people down. They lost 8 games last year. But when you look at the team overall and you factor in the home field advantage of Lincoln, Nebraska, and we'll talk about that in a bit, it's a pretty big test for Ohio State coming up.
Yeah, absolutely, because they were going to be fired up over there.
No doubt they will.
It'll be, the Red's going to be all in the stands. Of course, I think they're having a blackout or something they say over there, but I don't know what's going to happen. But I'll tell you what, they have probably one of the better groups of skilled athletes in the entire conference. You got a quarterback, Martinez, who's a lot like our guy. You've got to make sure you account for him on every play defensively. They got J.D. Spielman. Great receiver. And then Wan'Dale Robinson, kind of a hybrid receiver running back, got a lot of work last week. The thing they don't have, though, offensively, I'm not sure if their offensive line can hold up against the Buckeyes. They've given up, I think, 10 sacks already this year or something like that. But here's the thing I think that Nebraska has done that we haven't done. They've had to play 4 quarters a lot this year. We have not had to play 4 quarters.
Very fair point.
We cannot have a bad quarter.
And Ryan Day talked about that Tuesday, about the fact this is a team that hasn't experienced that kind of challenge yet in the fourth quarter. It's when you really – toughness is the message of the whole season, right? They haven't had their toughness really checked yet. Yep. And perhaps they'll get that check Saturday night in Lincoln at Memorial Stadium, which is a really cool place. If you've never seen a game at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, it's a great place, even if you're the visitor. People there are friendly. They welcome you there. They obviously want to beat you, but they are really they're really great people at Nebraska, and they do a great job putting on a football game. Even if you're the visitor, you'll have an opportunity to compete. You got some questions, some comments today for us. You're more than welcome to bring them our way, either if you're watching at NBC4i.com or on Facebook Live. If you're in Facebook Live, it's actually super easy. You just put in the comments whatever you want to ask us. I'll pull it up, and then you can fire away with your questions and comments about the season so far, questions you have for Coach Bill Conley, anything you want to know about the players so far, the season so far, or what to expect from Nebraska. Let's talk about a couple of individuals for the Buckeyes as we go out of the first 4 games. So we're done with a third of the regular season. Justin Fields has accounted for 19 touchdowns. Through 4 games last year, Dwayne Haskins accounted for 17. He has not turned the football over this year.
Right.
No fumbles, no interceptions.
Right.
How do you ask for more out of the kid? He's played phenomenally well in a brand new situation, and he seems to be only getting better.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head a minute ago. How are you going to play now, a big game away from home, hostile environment, and what are you going to do if you get down or you get behind? Are you going to be able to bring your team back? So that's the only thing he hasn't proven because he hasn't had to. How you handle pressure when it's all said and done.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, that's going to be tested for sure, especially if you trail early in the game. I don't mean like 5-0 to Miami early in the game. I'm talking about if you trailed at halftime or you're trailing, you're trying to lead your team from behind. That's where you're tested as a quarterback. The decisions you make, whether you press, whether you make a choice of throwing a football into tight coverage that maybe you ordinarily wouldn't make, take something a little less, a little lower risk. That's my curiosity, is how he handles that situation when that does, if it arises this year. Terry Henry says, will this be a ground game or air game this week? Where do you think the Buckeyes will lean against Nebraska?
I think this coaching staff's done a great job. Every game plan they've had, they seem like they prepare very well for the defense they're going up against, and also in down distance situations. I think it'll be a good run pass mix as before. I like that ratio of about 65-35, 60-40 run to pass. That's proved to be successful. It helps to play action game when you do it that way. So I don't think there'll be any major change in relation to the run pass. There might be some new things, some new wrinkles that Nebraska hasn't seen, because we haven't had to put many new things in so far. Just run your base stuff. But they'll have some gimmicks ready to go. I look for the same game plan, though. A lot of running, passing to a lot of different people. And that's the other thing about Justin Fields. The number of different people he's thrown the football to. He throws the guys open by reading the coverage, and he doesn't try to force the ball at all.
Yeah, that's fair. I think, and that obviously explains a little bit of the interception issue. I think it also, Bill, says a little something about the coaching staff, what they've done. Mike Yurcich has come in as the quarterback coach, did a wonderful job at Oklahoma State the past few years in that Mike Gundy offense. And, it seems like every year they plug in a quarterback, and that quarterback does great in terms of turnover efficiency, in terms of making smart plays, keeping the offense churning. They've done that with Justin Fields. It's just that they did it with a kid with a bigger talent level. You know what I'm saying? They found a 5-star and plugged him in and kept the same process, and they're getting now 5-star results. Also wanted to ask you about on the defensive side, Chase Young is right now among the national leaders in sacks per game, or sacks not only for a game, but sacks per season, I should say. He is threatening, as a junior, the career sacks record. If he continues on this pace, he could get there, which is a rather extraordinary stat. Vernon Golston has a season sack record at Ohio State. Of course, Vrabel has the total sack record.
Right.
I don't see him slowing down, provided he stays healthy and provided everything works out. It seems to me when they get healthier, when Tyreek Smith comes back and when Cooper comes back, that only aids Chase Young in his pursuit of more sacks.
Absolutely. And really, we haven't even brought the linebackers very much, or quarter blitzes or anything like that. We got a lot left in our defensive game plans for the year. I know that. You look at about a guy like Chase Young, the thing that is so impressive is that he's the physical specimen that backs it up. I mean, he plays the way he looks. He's got long arms, which allows him to keep the offensive man off of him. He has great hand-eye coordination, able to use the moves, get his whole body on half of the offensive man's body and all that. But the main reason, I think, why he has a chance of breaking all those records is because other teams are having to throw the football a lot to try to catch up with us.
Sure.
And so more opportunities for us to get after them.
Undoubtedly. I think that is the scariest part about Ohio State through 4 games. They've never been healthy.
Oh, yeah.
Not close.
We're not 100% yet.
Not close.
Right.
And that's coming. When Cooper gets back, we'll find out this week. It might be Saturday. He might be in the lineup. I saw him in pregame the other day. They looked pretty good. And I was like, okay.
Well, you make sure you send him and Chase off the bus first when they arrive there.
No kidding.
Oh,
terrifying dudes.
Absolutely.
It's weird. You see a picture of Chase Young and you're like, all right. Good luck with that, guys.
Is he human or is he a robot?
He is just an enormous talent, and he's an enormously scary guy. I mean, he's not. I think he's a wonderfully nice guy. Great kid. Great attitude, great everything. You just, man, playing football against him, holy cow.
And you talk about him, and I think a lot of guys on this football team, they're completely unselfish.
Yeah.
These guys, like I said before, they cheer for their teammates when they get in there. You know, they get sacks because everybody works together, or they make a big play because everybody working together. They're really team players first, and the coaching staff has said that a number of times. So that's one thing to be proud of, the guys, and that's one of the reasons why they're successful.
You've coached at Ohio State for many, many years, more than 20 years. In fact, you were coaching there, and obviously you played there. Obviously, back then, Ohio State did not play Nebraska. They were not in the Big Ten. So this is a relatively new phenomenon and a relatively new series for Ohio State and Nebraska. But in the history we've seen so far, competitive games. I mean, other than the blowout 2 years ago in Lincoln, where let's be honest, Nebraska was really as a program struggling at that time. They've since hired Scott Frost, just an incredibly important figure in Nebraska football and a guy who was beloved there. And so far, he has upped the recruiting base at Nebraska, which obviously starts everything. And the results have reflected that. A year ago was a struggle early, and they got better because they're playing so many young guys, including their quarterback, Adrian Martinez. This year, we're starting to see that. 3-1 start. Yes, some struggles. Yes, the Colorado game, that was an ugly finish. Should have won that football game. And last week, had to come from behind to beat Illinois.
Yep.
You don't like to see that, but they did it. And maybe that's a game they don't win a year ago. So I think there are signs of progress. What's your evaluation of Nebraska as a program right now, where they're trending?
Well, they're trying to get back to where they were. I don't know if they'll ever get there, but you know, they compared to other teams in the nation, they are 4th in all-time wins.
That's right.
Now, Michigan, Ohio State, I believe it's Texas, is in front of them, but they're trying to get back there. And their program was strong early. Then they had about a 20-year time period where they're down 15, 20 years. Then the Bob Devaney era is when they really got good. They won like 82% of their games. Then after that, Tom Osborne won 83% of their games and several national championships. And they want to get back to that level. To do that, they're going to have to do what you said. They're going to have to recruit really well, and they're going to have to have an area out of state, 2 or 3, 4 areas out of state that they can go to, because there's simply not enough good players in Nebraska to just count on your own in-state talent.
And when they were really rolling, Bill, they were dominating places like California. They went out to California and remember Lawrence Phillips, the running back there, was California. They would go out there and they would get elite talent that fit that system, that they would run downhill on people. And I formation, Tommy Frazier obviously running quarterback, and they had so many of those types of players come into the program and just keep the thing. They're feeding the system, basically. And that did dry up. And they had coaching changes and made a stylistic change.
Yes.
Went to a passing offense. It was a unmitigated disaster, being honest about it. And now it's a modern offense, what they're running with Scott Frost.
Yeah, they're trying to get more balance, obviously, but bringing in all these skilled talents. They're not going to throw the ball 70 or 80 times a game. They're going to try to have a good balance of run and pass. They're really trying to get kind of where we're at right now to that point. You know, you look at a team like Wisconsin, and we saw what they did this weekend. You know, they're a team that's going to smash them out there. They're kind of like the Nebraska of old, where they're going to really physically run the ball at you. But, you know, Nebraska knows this skilled talent. You got to do a lot of things in today's world of college football to score points.
Sure do. Let's talk a little bit about Terry Henry just wrote us a note here. And by the way, if you have a question for Coach, let us know here on Facebook Live. You can put it in the comments, or you can hit us up NBC4i.com and ask your question that way. Terry Henry, special teams should rock in this game. That leads me to this, Bill. 3 blocked kicks, tied for #1 in the country with Penn State. They blocked 2 punts. Chase Young has one of those blocks on the field goal against Cincinnati. They are, from a special team standpoint, because they've traditionally always played starters. That's fine. But it seems, Bill, like you're taking those starters, and then there's an application that I think this year might be a little bit different, a little bit special. Again, you're taking into consideration who they're playing. But they seem to be getting after it on the block teams when you're facing a punt, facing a field goal. They are just a very active bunch.
Yeah, and that, first of all, it goes to the coaching staff, because they've designed good blocks. You just don't line up and rush a punt, for example, the same way every time. When you're at rush a punt, here's the things you got to look for. You look for, first of all, the snap time and consistency. Is it a long snapper? Get it back there in a .65 to .68 time frame. Do you see if is it accurate? You see if the nose is the snapping back, if it goes up in the air too much, so if you got a windy night, that'll slow the snap down. Little things like that. You look at the punter, his hand to foot time, what time it takes him when it touches his fingertips to leave his foot. Does he take too long? Does he bring the ball into his body some, which adds more time? You look at the block point, where it leaves his foot. So the very specific things you look for when you're preparing for those types of blocks. And of course, one thing you look for is weak personnel. Maybe somebody you think you can get by, or and use the speed this football team has. And then there's another thing about blocking kicks. You have to have guys with the attitude, I'm going to block it. I'm not going to be denied. You have the fastest guy in the world, but he might shy away from that block. You have to have guys that really want to do it. And take a lot of pride.
Well, how big a deal is it, though, Bill, to have starters in that group? Guys that are playing, 3-4 snaps a series on offense or defense and then take them back out on the punt block team or the punt return team. How big a deal is that?
Well, I think it's a very big deal because if they're a competitor, if they're a starter, if they're a special athlete, okay, it's better to have that guy on the field than a tired second teamer.
Sure.
That's how coaches look on it. You know, the guys who are playmakers are playmakers.
That's very interesting. And obviously Ohio State's adopted that philosophy. Urban Meyer made a big deal about that when he got here. And obviously Ohio State special teams overall in his tenure were outstanding. Very few breakdowns on that side of the ball. The biggest thing they had trouble with was one year they couldn't kick the ball inbounds when they had kickoffs.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Well, and Jim Tressel was the same way. And
yes,
we
he was.
spent a lot of time on special teams.
No bigger champion of the punt.
Great
Jim Tressel. And you know what? He was pretty good at it too. So we're taking your questions and comments right now, NBC4i.com, and also on Facebook Live as you're watching us here. Appreciate the audience here tuning in. Looks like we got a big old crowd out there. We appreciate that. Coach, let's talk a little bit about going to Lincoln, Nebraska on a Saturday night game. ESPN's got the recipe set up, right? You got game day out there. They got 370 straight sellouts. No non-sellouts in Lincoln, Nebraska since 1962.
Amazing.
It's all, the recipe's right there, right? Nebraska needs that signature comeback win to announce that they're back to the nation. This is me stirring the pot. How does Ohio State combat that?
Well, first of all, what you do is you don't make them bigger than what they are.
Yeah.
John Cooper was great about that statement. He said, don't make them be bigger than they are, Billy. Now, come on. So you don't want to make them bigger than they are. And here's the other thing. Remember this statement here. It might be the most important thing we say today. It's not what they do. It's what we do. We got to make ourselves perform at a high level. Heck with what Nebraska is going to do. We'll have a game plan for that and stuff. We can't worry about it. We got to execute the offense and defense as designed. So
Dafford asked an interesting question here on our Facebook Live. He says, Coach, would you have a player play on both sides of the ball? That's something I've never asked you about in modern college football because of specialization, right? And there's so much intricate study involved with playing one position on the football team. Can you imagine being a modern player now, even if it's your most talented guy, going on both sides of the ball and performing? I guess a modern example would be a receiver who could play DB, something like that. But I don't know how they could do that.
I think in a limited form he could. Think back when we won the national championship, we beat Miami.
Chris Gamble?
Chris Gamble played over 120 snaps. Offense, defense, special teams. Now he didn't play every snap.
Right.
So you can find, as a coach, you find times in the game where you can spell a guy a little bit and take him out and get a rest. But if a guy's, just when we talk about special teams again, you know, you go for the guy that can make the play. So maybe a guy that has a special talent. And I think like defensively, how about a guy that's really good at man-to-man coverage?
Right.
They can run with the guy down the field. Where that's all he has to do basically.
Right. True specialist.
True specialist. That'd be fine. You can do that. I don't think you'd have a guy that's up in the middle, you know, in the front lines, do that. Because that's a physical game. Your offensive, defensive linemen, you know, they really put forth tremendous effort because not only are they going every snap, but they're going against big guys, 300-pound guys against them. Now, you don't think that's going to weigh on you? After going 4 quarters?
Quite literally.
Try bench pressing 300 pounds for 4 quarters. There you go.
It doesn't work in any quarter for most of us. That's a really good. That's a good question because I think in modern college football, people are like, well, if this is the best player on the team, why isn't he out there all the time? Or why can't you find a role for him on the other side of the ball? Because they all grew up playing both ways. Typically, kids are playing both ways in high school. So that's a good question, Dafford. Appreciate that. One last call for questions at Facebook Live. Just write your question in the comment tab there, and we'll pull it up and ask it to Coach. Our final few minutes here, want to talk to Coach about what happened. You mentioned a moment ago the Wisconsin win over Michigan. So we're going to talk about the Big Ten race right now because obviously that's starting to matter a little bit more. This will be game 2 in the Big Ten for Ohio State. They have to play a Big Ten home game. That comes next week when Michigan State comes to town. And Michigan State's desperate for a big win. They had a real difficult setback. They looked a little bit better last week against Northwestern. We could talk about Wisconsin's dominance. It might be more fun to talk about what happened to Michigan.
For sure.
So let's start there. What is wrong with Michigan?
Well, first of all, Wisconsin physically beat them. Number one, if you're the most physical team, you're going to win most games. They were the most physical. They knocked them off the football. And we saw also in the Army game against Michigan, that there are some weaknesses there because those little guys from Army, tough little guys, made all kinds of penetration in the backfield several times. So physically, they're not playing very well. They're still trying to find an identity on offense. They got a new offensive coordinator who wasn't really an offensive coordinator from the school he came from, and so he's getting a lot of heat right now. They don't know who they are yet.
Right, you're right.
And like we talk about, take care of your own business at hand before you worry about who you're playing. They can't get things handled right now.
It's like they had personnel built to run one offense and are trying to implement a new style of offense with the same personnel. And that transition is, as it appears on television, painful. Yep. Wanted to ask you this about, Michigan has laid its hat on defense hung its hat on defense last couple of years.
Right.
#1 ranked defense for most of last season, you'll recall. Yeah. Remember that was the big storyline going into the Ohio State game. Could Ohio State even score on them? That's how good they were. Remember the answer to that question. But this year, Michigan isn't getting the same kind of pressure they got a year ago. Chase Winovich and those guys who were leading the way at the defensive end position, they're gone. Michigan can't pressure the passer right now. And so when Wisconsin went to throw, there was plenty of time. When their opponents this year have tried to throw the ball, they haven't been in a big panic to get rid of the football because they're under such duress. Michigan, to me, as I watch them, I don't see them affecting an offensive line too much.
No, and as a matter of fact, teams learned a lot from our attack against them last year also on how to handle some of those crossing patterns, stuff like that. So that's one of the issues, and because they're not having all that pressure up front, they got to rely on the secondary to help out and run support, and when you do that, you're sacrificing the play action pass a lot. So nobody is really stepping up on that defensive field to make a difference.
Now let's talk about Wisconsin. As the victors go the spoils, and they looked really, really good. Obviously, they've got arguably the best running back in America in Taylor, and watching what he did in the first half of that game, you would wonder why he's not the front runner for the Heisman Trophy, and maybe by the end of the year he will be. He's probably the best running back in the country. I think that's pretty easy to argue. And he's also getting, I think, Bill, the biggest difference, they've always had a good offensive line, right? Big guys that move people. That's not new for Wisconsin. That's same old, that's standard operating procedure. I think the difference is they have the new quarterback, a highly recruited guy out of high school who is a competent passer. And so that is a new part of their offense they're more confident in when they get into a long third down situation. They feel like they're going to pick it up. And I think that's the biggest difference in them is they feel more balanced than I think they've felt in a long time.
Absolutely. He can throw the football. He can throw the football on the run. He can throw it in drop back situations. I'm impressed. And Taylor, the thing I noticed last week, I didn't realize until I really watched him a lot. I mean, we knew he was a good runner, a powerful runner, but he has great vision.
Sure.
Several times he kept that ball back against the grain for the big gain. And so he is the premier running back in the country. And if he keeps it going, obviously he'll be in New York for that one of the Heisman finals.
Undoubtedly. He'll have a great candidacy. He's at a great school, a school where that position has won the Heisman before. I don't think there's any doubt into the year, depending on how these quarterbacks shake out with obviously Burrow, with what he's doing at LSU. Maybe Justin Fields gets in that discussion. Obviously Tua, you're talking about the quarterback at Clemson, the quarterback at Oklahoma. I bet you he's right there at the end. He could be the most consistent guy this year. And one quick thing, by the way, Wisconsin is home again this week. They get Northwestern there, and it looks like it's basically smooth sailing for them until they come to Columbus in terms of the Big Ten race.
I think it's really starting to show a picture that they are the premier Big Ten team in the West.
Yeah.
And it's also showing Ohio State's premier Big Ten team in the East.
Yes.
So if you're in Vegas now, those two teams you would think would be the two playing.
Undoubtedly. But there's injuries happen, long way to go.
Game at a time.
There's a reason they play them. Terry has another question. Terry asks, does having a night game affect play calling and play style? And I think that's actually a really good question, Terry, and here's why. Because when you're going into a really aggressive environment like that at night, the opposition, when you're the road team, the home team is going to be playing way above their heads. They're going to be so excited and have so much energy. Does it affect the way that you build a game plan? And what I mean by that is in terms of aggressive play calling, trying to take them out of the game early, but also maybe risking putting yourself in some trouble. How would you handle that as a coach?
Now, I don't think it affects in relation to the time of the day. That would have no effect. I think obviously you're playing a good team away from home. You got to be very careful on your side of the field not to make mistakes.
Right.
I don't care if it's sunlight or sundown or a snowstorm or whatever it is. But no, I don't think it has an effect. What is the tough part? The tough part for playing a night game on the road is the waiting. It really makes you mentally exhausted because you're waiting around all day in an unusual environment to play a good football team. And so that's where it wears on you.
You're hanging out in the hotel all day, that kind of thing. 8,000 meetings.
You would not believe the amount of time coaches spend on coming up with that game day schedule away from home, because you can't have meetings all day long. You can't keep that type of concentration.
Right. You'd wear them out mentally before you even go play the game, right?
Yeah. So you'll have some special teams meetings. You'll have walkthroughs and things like that. And then you'll have your final preparations, the 4 hours before a game, your team meal, and all those things. But and you give them time to relax a bit. Usually they go back to the rooms and they watch games on TV.
Right. Exactly. They find ways to kill the time like the rest of us do. We all have to wait for 7:30 Saturday night. I'll be in Lincoln Saturday night covering the game. Looking forward to that. It's one of my favorite road destinations in the world. I love going to Lincoln. And like I said earlier, if you've never been to a game at Lincoln, it's a wonderful building, 91,000 seats there. They've got all these great traditions, all the red balloons they set off.
Oh, it's unfair, too, about this. They have two mascots.
Oh, well, tell me more.
Unfair. Little Red and Herbie Husker.
Herbie Husker and Little Red's the one you see all the time in the overalls, right?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, a little inflated.
Now, who's Herbie Husker? I don't know him.
That's the big hit.
Oh, that's the big. Okay,
that's the guy.
Got it. I didn't know that. What else do you know about Nebraska? You normally have this stuff studied up pretty well.
Well, you know, the history of the program speaks for itself. All the great players and stuff like that. But it is a place that. Here's a little trivia for you.
Okay.
The man who designed Ohio Stadium, when they went to build their stadium in Lincoln, they sought his advice. So the original stadium in Nebraska, they've upgraded it some now.
Sure.
If you look at the original stadium in Nebraska and Ohio Stadium, it's the exact same design except it's a little smaller. So there's a tie there.
Interesting. Yeah, the way they kind of expanded the place, they obviously have double deck on the other side, so it's a big old place. The end zones are really interesting because the end zones just kind of go up on both sides forever. You know, they're super they're not great seats, to be honest. I mean, you're in the building, but you can see the football game, but you're so far away from it. There's some interesting, you know, in terms of the mechanics of the stuff that we would ordinarily go to. It's nothing like the fans would ordinarily see, but you know, the undercarriage of the arena, if you will. It's just, there's people walking around everywhere. They have handicap accessible seating that's on the field behind a fence.
There you go.
So, I mean, they have some really interesting things that are unique to it. And if you've ever seen the Nebraska walkout from the locker room to the field, it is awesome. I mean, they do a great job with it because they have the fans under the stands. They'll come down and line up they gate it off, and then they have the fans line up, and they are screaming like just psycho as they're coming out to the field. They got smoke machines going off, and it is a really cool environment. They do it up.
Yeah. Well, and they're called Huskers now. We know they were not always the Cornhuskers.
What were they, Bill?
Oh, they were the Bug Eaters. Everybody knows that.
Is that true?
Absolutely. They originally called the Bug Eaters, named after the bats, the particular type of bat that was out there that would swoop up the insects, the Bug Eaters.
The things you learn on this show, that is awesome. So before I'll let you digest that for a second. Get it? So your prediction on what we're going to see Saturday night, how do you think it's going to work out?
You know, I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I really don't at all. I think this will go to the fourth quarter. We might have things pretty well under control by, 5 or 10 minutes into the fourth quarter. But I'll tell you what, I think Nebraska's going to fight hard. I think if we can prevent the big play, which was one of our issues last year, then we'll be fine. We'll be solid because I think our defense is so much improved, and I think we'll get after our offensive line. I don't think it'll blow out, but I would say it would shock me if we don't win the game by about 10 points. Okay, but you think that's a pretty close football game though, fourth quarter. You think that's a game that might be
not quite decided or not quite comfortable.
Yeah, turnovers will be the thing.
I think that's a huge, my question is if Ohio State can play clean football the way they have, and also they've also played very penalty-free football through the first 4 games, which has been a huge change from a year ago. If they can continue on that path, Nebraska is going to have a really hard time over the course of 4 quarters playing with the competition, playing with the talent level Ohio State brings to the party. I will say I think the first half is going to be really hard. I think it might be a 7-point game or a tie game at halftime. I think Nebraska will make it not just on pure emotion. They're excited to play every game. It's just that this is the kind of game that the coaching staff and the players know that they have to go win to announce their re-arrival, as you will, as a major college football program. This is the kind of game they have to go win. And they're going to have a few of these this year. And this is their first opportunity. Everything is set up for them. And they've got good players. They've got a quarterback who's capable. We saw him last year. Last year was a 5-point game in Ohio Stadium. Granted, Ohio State defensively last year, not what it is this year. But it does show you the kind of threat that they can be. When they're running that offense, they've got that kind of a quarterback threat. I tell you what, I think that first half is going to be something else Saturday.
Well, and it's going to be louder than any game they've been in so far, many of those players. I mean,
no doubt.
The Indiana game, even though it was Indiana, I mean, it's like a Sunday social. Bring it lunch. They don't get too fired up about anything over there. But they used to get fired up when Bobby Knight threw his chairs and stuff like that. But football-wise, they don't get too excited. But this place, the crowd will be into it. So what do the coaches do? They'll have those big speakers on this week in practice.
Yeah.
They have them blaring because the crowd will have an effect. And let's talk about penalties. That's where you can have a crowd effect.
No doubt. We'll be following that very closely. I think that's going to be the biggest difference in the game, how Ohio State handles a true road environment for the first time. That's a really good point from Bill. That'll do it here for the show this week of Gridiron Nation Online. We come back every Wednesday around 2 o'clock. We'll be here online, NBC4i.com, and, of course, Facebook Live on the NBC4 Facebook page. Have yourself a great week, and we'll see you back here next week.